A lot of people don't know that before I became an international man of misery. What? Mystery. I have 4 kids. My oldest is now 22. My youngest is 13. My first 2, Dylan and Grace, I stayed home with them primarily for their first few years. And then when we were having our 3rd child, my wife's like, hey, fella, can you fire up your game? Take over the world so I can stay home with the kids. And I said, yeah. And that happened. What? No, but things developed to the point where I said, I'll have to be gone a lot, but I think we can make this happen. So that all transpired. I'd make it sound like it was easy. It was not easy. It was very fortuitous on many levels. But prior to that moment in time, I stayed home with my 2 oldest kids. What did I do most of the time? Well, I had my own band back home, so I played out quite a bit. The band was quite popular back home. Greg Koch and the Tone Controls, as the ensemble was called, and I still do gigs with that particular iteration. But I did some sessions down in Chicago, working primarily for a guy that did a lot of jingles, soundtrack work, commercial stuff, radio stuff, things of this nature. And I'd go down there. It was kind of hot and cold. I'd go down there a few times a week, and then I wouldn't be there for a month, and then I'd go down there a few times, da-da-da-da-da. And then I had started my relationship with Fender, so I'd probably be gone maybe 2 weeks out of the year doing that, and then just gigging with the band. So I stayed home with the kids most of the time. But what was interesting, some funny stories, if I had stuff going on, I would have to get babysitters or take the kids with me. One of my favorite stories is, well, there's a few of them. There's an independent radio station home, a college radio station home called WMSC. Some of you who are familiar with any of my activities know I recorded a record called Live on the Radio, which was recorded at the WMSC studios. It's a very, very cool station. And you basically play live on the radio there, and then they record it, and it sounds awesome. Anyway, so there was a particular benefit we were doing for the radio station at this venue in Milwaukee called the Up and Under. And I remember I went down there with Dylan, because my oldest at the time, who was probably 3, and I think my daughter was probably another babysitter. I had this one babysitter that would take Grace, but she wouldn't take Grace and Dylan. So it's a long story. Anyway, so Dylan, maybe the story will explain that. So I go into this bar during the day. It was not like it was at night. It was a bacchanal. The bar was closed, and we were meeting for this meeting to talk about this benefit. A couple of different band members were there from various different iterations. And this fella, Tom Crawford, bless him, who is still the program director of that radio station. And Tom's about my size, height-wise. And so I come in there with Dylan, and I said, Tom, you ever meet my son? This is Dylan. He's like, hey, little fella, put her there. And Dylan winds up and goes, poo, right in this guy's balls. I mean, just full on, just like, I don't know what possessed him to do it. I don't know what was going through his little mind, but he wound up and he punched this dude right in the ball sack. And this guy was down for the count. Huge dude. He's a big fella. And I see this guy all the time. We often talk about this. I just found out for the first time a couple months ago we were going, and of course he's seen, Dylan now is huge. He's my size and maybe taller. And he's like, I came in to play on the radio with my son on drums. My son Dylan plays drums, he's a good little drummer. So we were in there playing, and I go, hey, Tom, remember Dylan? He's like, did I ever tell you that I went to the bathroom and threw up after your son punched me in the balls? I said, no, I didn't know that, Tom, but I'm very, very sorry about it. And of course, Dylan's like, hey, what can I say? Whoa. That particular trip was also memorable for the fact that I created a crime against humanity. Before the fist bump had entered into the lexicon of popular greeting, I kind of exemplified my squareness by one of the guys that was on the bill was a guy named Harvey Scales. Harvey Scales is a band called Harvey Scales and the Seven Sounds. He now lives in Atlanta, I think, but he was living in Milwaukee for a long period of time. Harvey Scales actually wrote the song Disco Lady. Remember, move it in, move it out, fly, Disco Lady. I don't think those are the words, but the Disco Lady part I know is right. Anyways, and I hadn't seen Harvey for a while. He's like, hey, Greg, how's it going? And he put out his fist. What did I know about fist bumping? So I shook the fist. Crime against humanity. Imagine when he tells that story. Man, I put the fist on this big dumb son of a gun, grabbed my fist and shook. I shook the fist, ladies and gentlemen. So that particular occasion was known for two things. One, Dylan punching poor Tom Crawford right in the ball sack. And two, me shaking the fist. Now, another story is that I used to have to get babysitters when I'd do these sessions. As I said, I had this one gal, Margie. Margie would take little Grace, because Grace was this adorable little girl, and I'll take Grace. Dylan, my man, was a little hellion. No, he wasn't that bad, but he was a boy kid, and boy kids are just, well, in this particular instance, a little bit more high maintenance. So she goes, I'll take that one, but I won't take the other one. I was like, great. So now if I have a session or something, I got to drop Grace off at the south side of Milwaukee. My parents' house, it was in Wauwatosa, so I'd have to drop one off there, go to the other side of town, and then head down to Chicago. This one particular occasion, I get a call to do a session, and the gal that was in charge of booking the session says, hey, can you come to this session tomorrow? I said, sure. I called her back, I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I cannot get a babysitter. She goes, well, what are your kids' ages? And I said, well, you know, the time Dylan was like 4, maybe 3, and Grace was like, you know, 2-ish, and 4 and 2 or something like that. So she goes, I'll watch him. That'll be fine. Just bring him down, and, you know, we'll have a good old time while you guys do the session upstairs. I'm like, okay. So I brought the kids in, and they were downstairs playing as the session was going a little bit longer than usual. And at one point, she brought the kids upstairs to say hello to Dad in the session. You know, studio musicians all around, clients, you know, full on session. And my son sees me and comes up and just clamps himself on my leg. Dad, oh, Dad. And there I am sitting there, and they're all looking around going, can we continue to record? And I'm just going, yeah, okay, little fella. We gotta, and I gotta tell you, I think I pooped a little, if I may be so bold. But it all panned out well. That was the last time she babysat for him, though, and I wouldn't have asked again, to be honest with you. But that was kind of the gist of it back then, is that if I wanted stuff done, I would have to go Herculean efforts to get babysitters. Then my favorite thing was, too, when the kids were very young, is that when I would go do gigs on weekends, so I'm watching the kids all during the week, a weekend comes along, and sometimes, you know, this is back in the day when I'd play late. So you'd get in, if you played out of town at all, by the time you got back home, it's like 3, 4 in the morning, right? And I knew, without fail, 8 o'clock in the morning, my wife just felt the need to vacuum the hall right outside of my bedroom. And then talking to the kids, hey, get away from there. Needless to say, I'd be rousted up from the sepulcher bright and early. That kind of nailed that in the coffin for me as far as doing the late night gigs. Of course, things graduated to the point where I didn't have to do that as much anyways. But anyway, those are some Mr. Mom stories. There are more, but I think I've repressed them all. No, actually, it was a glorious time. I was very fortunate about to spend time with my kids. And then my wife was able to spend a bunch of time with with all the kids when I went on the road. And my traveling was to the point where, you know, I'd probably gone 120 to 150 days a year, which may seem like a lot, but when I'm home, I'm home. And I have a pretty flexible schedule, so I can kind of navigate around different activities. So it's been good. My kids are still talking to me. I don't think they'll end up on Montel. Is Montel even on anymore? Or whatever talk show going, my dad was never around, and my mom, oh my God, she used to vacuum outside my door. No, that's all. I think we'll be okay. So anyway, Mr. Mom Stories from Drade. We'll see you cats later.